You don't remember, do you?
Remember what?
The first time you saved my life.
She said it so quietly I almost missed it, the way I'd been missing her for years. The girl who made my coffee every morning and never told me why. The girl who fixed my work at 2 a.m. and never signed her name. The girl who had every reason to let me fall and spent 3 years making sure I didn't. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her story. I didn't know that everything she'd ever done, every silent act, every invisible sacrifice, every blueprint she drew in the dark, traced back to 5 words I said when I was 16 and forgot by Monday. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because before I understood any of that, before I learned what it looks like when someone loves you so quietly you almost miss it forever, I had to die first. Do you want to know what it sounds like? The last 3 seconds of your life? The first time I died, it was raining. Not the kind of poetic rain you see in films. The kind that hammers your windshield so hard you can barely see the road. The kind that makes every streetlight look like a smear of light through wet glass. I was doing 90 in a 60 zone, half a bottle of whiskey warming my blood, and I didn't care. I had nothing left to care about. Marcus Chen, my best friend since we were 14, my business partner for 15 years, the man I would have taken a bullet for, had stolen my life's work. Every design I'd poured 18 months into for the Lakewood Cultural Center, every blueprint, every rendering, submitted under a company I'd never heard of, with a plagiarism claim filed against me. And the embezzlement charges? Forged. My name, my signature, my finances, weaponized so perfectly that by the time I realized what was happening, there was nothing left to fight with. Diana helped him, my girlfriend of 3 years, the woman who said, "I love you" every morning before work, had been copying files from my home laptop and handing them to Marcus for months. She'd been sleeping with him for months, and I was too busy trusting them both to see what was right in front of me. I lost my firm in 72 hours. My architecture license suspended. Clients vanished. Colleagues crossed the street when they saw me coming. 15 years of building something real, erased like a rough sketch on tracing paper. I wasn't trying to die. I was trying to leave. Running to the airport, running from the city, running from the fact that every person I trusted had a knife in their hand, and I never saw the blade. But the rain was heavy, and the whiskey was heavier, and the truck's headlights filled my windshield before I could even think about turning the wheel. In the last 3 seconds, the last 3 seconds of my entire life, I saw one thing. My phone, wedged between the seat and the console, its screen bright against the dark. A notification I'd never opened. A message from a name I'd seen 1,000 times in the office directory and never once remembered. Luna Voss. She'd been trying to reach me for weeks. Calls I let go to voicemail. Messages I swiped away without reading. She was a junior designer at my firm, someone I walked past every single day without knowing her last name. And in that message, she had evidence. Server logs showing Marcus accessing my private design folders for months. File transfers, timestamps, proof that could have saved everything. I never opened it. The windshield caved in at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, and the last thing I saw wasn't my life flashing before my eyes. It was her name on a screen. A name I should have known. A name I should have answered. Luna. I woke up at my desk. The coffee was still warm. Morning light cut across my keyboard at the angle that told me it was 8 a.m. in February, 1 month before the competition deadline. 1 month before Marcus would steal everything. 1 month before I would die on a highway in the rain. I gripped the edge of my desk for 60 seconds, waiting for the dream to end. It didn't. That's when she appeared. A quiet presence at the edge of my vision. The way she always appeared, I'd realize later. A paper cup placed on my desk with the kind of precision that comes from practice. Hundreds of mornings of practice. I looked down at it. Black coffee, no sugar, splash of oat milk, my exact order. An order I had never told a single person in that office. For the first time in 3 years of walking past her desk every morning, of ignoring the coffee she left without a word, of never once wondering who she was, I looked up. She was already turning to leave. Dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days or years. Hair pulled back tight, shoulders drawn in. The kind of person your eyes skip over in a crowded room without even realizing they were there. But I saw her. God help me. For the first time, I actually saw her, and she froze.
Your 3 o'clock got moved to 4. I left the updated brief on your desk. That's all.
She practically fled. I watched her go. This quiet ghost who had been placing perfect coffee on my desk every morning for 3 years, while I never once looked up to see who left it. How did she know my order? How did she know about the oat milk? I stared at the cup, and something tightened in my chest that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with guilt. But I didn't have time for guilt. Not yet. I had 30 days to stop Marcus Chen from destroying my life. And this time, I knew exactly how he'd try. So I moved. First, I backed up every Lakewood design file to a secure cloud server with timestamps that couldn't be altered. If Marcus was going to steal my work, the originals would exist somewhere he couldn't touch. Second, I called Uncle Henry. Henry, I need your help with something. I can't explain everything yet, but I need you to trust me. Don't ask questions. He didn't ask questions. He just said one word in that gruff voice of his. When. That evening, I drove to his workshop and put a drive in his hands containing every original Lakewood file. I told him to register them with a legal timestamp service, get notarized copies, keep everything safe. He looked at me for a long moment, the way only a man who spent 40 years pouring foundations knows how to look at you. Steady, unshakable. Then he nodded. That was Henry. He didn't need reasons. He built things. Questions came later. The next morning, I watched Marcus across the conference table at our weekly meeting, and for the first time, I saw what I'd been blind to for 15 years. The way his jaw tightened, barely visible, just a flicker, every time a client praised my design work. The way his eyes tracked the Lakewood folder on my desk like a dog watching a bone. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes when he said, "Nice work on the east elevation, Adrian." Jealousy. It had been there the whole time, written on his face in a language I was too trusting to read. After the meeting, I walked to the front desk. Quick question. Luna Voss, the junior designer. How long has she been with us? I don't think I've ever actually spoken to her. The office manager looked at me like I'd asked what floor we were on. 3 years, Adrian. She started the same month you won the Morrison Award. 3 years. She had been 3 feet away from me for 1,000 days, making my coffee, fixing my files, trying to warn me about the man who would destroy my life. And I didn't even know her name. I felt sick. But I had 30 days, and this time, I was going to see everything I'd missed. I was going to stop the man I used to call my brother, and I was going to find out why a girl named Luna Voss knew my coffee order better than the woman who slept in my bed. I started paying attention, not to Marcus. I already knew what Marcus was. I started paying attention to her, and what I found kept me awake for 3 nights straight. It began with the lobby rendering for the Morrison project, a design I'd been struggling with for a week. The light angles were wrong, the proportions felt heavy, something was off that I couldn't fix. One morning I came in and it was done. Not just fixed, reimagined. The structural flow was elegant, intuitive, better than anything I would have produced on my best day. No name on it, no note, no credit. I checked the version history. Luna Voss, 2:47 a.m. I went deeper. Older project files. Presentation decks from 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, and I found her everywhere, like fingerprints on glass that nobody had thought to look for, code optimizations I'd taken credit for in client meetings, structural corrections that saved us from a building code violation on the Ashfield Tower, rendering improvements that won us contracts, all unsigned, all done between midnight and 4 in the morning while the rest of us were asleep. She'd been quietly making me look brilliant for 3 years, and I'd been too busy accepting the applause to wonder who was writing the music. I started staying late, not because I had to, because she was always there, every night. Long after the last designer packed up and left, Luna was still at her desk, lit blue by her monitor, earbuds in, drawing things that would never carry her name. Some nights, after she thought I'd gone, I noticed her switch to a different folder, personal work, her own designs, something private and separate from the firm's projects. She always closed it when she heard footsteps. I didn't pry, not yet. Our first conversations were painful. She defaulted to work talk like a reflex. Schedules, deadlines, technical specifications, safe ground, solid walls. How long have you been staying this late?
Since I started?
Do you eat dinner?
Sometimes.
I brought takeout the next night. She stared at the containers like they'd materialized from another dimension. No one had ever just brought her food before. We ate in near silence. She couldn't hold eye contact for more than 2 seconds. Her gaze kept drifting to the floor, the wall, anywhere that wasn't my face. I asked about her design approach on the lobby fix, and something extraordinary happened. She lit up. 3 seconds of pure fire behind those dark circled eyes, talking about load distribution and natural light angles with a fluency that made me feel like a first-year student sitting at the feet of a master. Then she caught herself, went quiet, pulled back into that shell like a door slamming shut. I learned something important. Architecture was her language, the only one she trusted. She could talk about buildings all night. She couldn't talk about herself for 3 seconds. And once, when I handed her the chopsticks and our fingers accidentally brushed, she pulled her hand away so fast you'd have thought I'd burned her. The same week, I took Diana to dinner. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to run a test. Over wine and appetizers, I casually mentioned that I was considering carbon fiber reinforced panels for the Lakewood East facade, an unusual choice. Distinctive, and entirely fabricated. I had no intention of using carbon fiber anything. I invented the detail on the spot and fed it to her between bites of pasta. Diana nodded along, changed the subject to her coworker's divorce, and forgot about it. 24 hours later, Marcus brought up carbon fiber panel options for east-facing surfaces in our morning partners meeting. A detail so specific and unusual that there was only one way he could have known it. She was the pipeline. Confirmed. I needed Diana to keep feeding Marcus information. If I confronted her now, the line would go dead and Marcus might change his entire plan. So I sat across from her at that dinner table and I watched, the way a man watches a stranger wearing his girlfriend's face. She said, "I love you, babe," 3 times that night. She talked about her day, her colleagues, her frustrations. She complained about Marcus being impossible lately, controlling, paranoid, demanding. "I've been keeping notes on everything," she said casually, "just in case he tries to pin something on me." She said it like gossip. I heard it like a ticking clock. She never once asked about my day. She never once asked about anything. Luna hadn't said 3 words to me all week, but she knew my coffee order, my deadline schedule, and that I'd been struggling with the lobby rendering. Diana said "I love you" 3 times in one dinner and didn't notice I'd changed my phone wallpaper 2 weeks ago. I drove home that night and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a vast, quiet nothing where a 3-year relationship used to be. That's when I knew it was already over. Luna caught me at my desk the next morning. She had a printout in her hand, a single server log entry from the previous night, showing Marcus's credentials accessing my private design folder.
The server logs show irregular access from Marcus's credentials to your private design folder. I flagged it to IT, but they classified it as authorized maintenance. I don't think it was maintenance.
I noticed her word choice. Flagged, past tense, not "I'm flagging." She'd been watching this longer than she was telling me. She also pointed to something else in the logs, a file reference to an external company called Meridian Design Group, a name that didn't appear anywhere in our client database or contractor lists. I filed it away. Then, over the next few days, the other moments started. Diana visited the office that afternoon. She touched my arm, called me babe in front of the whole team, casual, possessive, performing love for an audience. I heard a quiet, sharp sound from across the room. I turned. Luna was at her desk, staring at the remains of a coffee cup that had cracked clean through in her grip, ceramic shards in her palm, coffee pooling across a stack of drawings. She cleaned it up without a word, didn't look at me, didn't look at Diana. But that cup had been whole 30 seconds ago. Next morning, Diana's flowers on my desk were gone, replaced by a small cactus, spiky, stubborn, very much alive. I'd mentioned liking cacti exactly once, 6 months earlier, in a passing comment to no one in particular. Luna never acknowledged the swap. And when Diana stopped by again that afternoon and called me babe one more time, Luna's pen stopped moving, mid-line, mid-stroke. She didn't look up, she didn't react, but the pen stopping was the tell, a crack in the mask so small that only someone who was watching would catch it. I was watching. Marcus pushed for the final Lakewood designs that week. Team backup, he called it. Standard procedure, nothing unusual. I played along and handed him a modified version of my design with a subtle structural inconsistency embedded like a watermark, a fingerprint that would prove the stolen copy came from my files. The trap was set. But Luna was too observant. She noticed I was copying files at odd hours, staying late for reasons that didn't match my schedule, making calls behind closed doors. She was too smart not to see the pattern.
Adrian, you've been acting differently. You're staying later than usual, and the file backups don't match the project timeline. Is something going on with the Lakewood files?
Luna, drop it. This isn't your problem. She went completely still. Not surprised, not hurt, just still. That trained silence. The kind you learn in foster homes when the adults raise their voices. Don't argue, don't cry, don't give them a reason to move you to the next house. She nodded once, stood up, walked away without a sound. I watched her go, and something cracked in my chest that had nothing to do with Marcus or Diana or the case I was building. I'd spoken to her the way every person in her life had spoken to her, sharply, dismissively, like her concern was an inconvenience instead of a lifeline, and she'd accepted it. No pushback, no wounded expression, just quiet compliance, because that's what survival looked like for a girl who learned early that the wrong word could cost you a home. That was the worst part. She didn't even flinch. She was used to it. Marcus received the modified design, but he wasn't stupid. 15 years of working alongside me meant he knew my design language the way a pianist knows a composer's style. He spotted the structural inconsistency, not enough to call it sabotage, but enough to make him cautious. He didn't confront me. Instead, he adapted, created a hybrid version, blending my stolen elements with his own modifications, smoothing over the fingerprint I'd planted. The trap wasn't broken, but it wasn't clean either. I found the hybrid in the file access logs using Luna's server data. He'd created a new version that diluted the evidence enough that a board presentation wouldn't be a clean kill. I needed something stronger, something he couldn't adapt his way out of. That evening, I found Luna at her desk. She was still carrying the silence from 2 days ago like a weight across her shoulders. She didn't look up when I approached. The server access you showed me. You said you'd flagged it before. You've been watching this for longer than you told me. Do you have more? Everything? From the beginning? She looked at me for a long time. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small black drive, worn at the edges, handled often. She placed it on the desk between us, without a word. Months of compiled server access logs, file transfer records, timestamps. Every time Marcus had accessed my private folders, logged and dated and organized with a precision that bordered on obsessive. She'd been building this for months. Quietly, invisibly, the way she did everything. I picked up the drive, looked at it, looked at her. I could see it in her eyes. Not fear of Marcus, fear of me. Fear of what would happen when the crisis ended and she became invisible again. I didn't ask why she'd held back, not yet. There would be time for that question later, and I already suspected the answer would break my heart. I had what I needed. 23 days until the competition deadline. A design trap that was cracked, but not useless. A drive full of evidence that a quiet girl had been building in the shadows for months. And a best friend who was about to learn that the man he'd been stealing from had been watching every single move. 3 weeks later, the competition deadline arrived. Marcus submitted the Lakewood design through Meridian Design Group, the shell company Luna had flagged in his files weeks ago. He didn't know I recognized the name. He didn't know I'd been waiting for this exact moment. I let him do it. I needed the crime committed. A submission to a public competition creates a legal record that can't be walked back. Without it, Marcus could claim he was just exploring ideas internally, nothing official, nothing actionable. The second the submission went through, I called an emergency board meeting. 12 people around a mahogany conference table, partners, senior associates, and Marcus, sitting 3 seats to my left with a smile that didn't know it was about to die. I presented my original Lakewood designs with timestamps predating Marcus's submission by months. Then the modified version, the fingerprinted design I'd fed him, showing the structural watermark that proved his copy came from my files. The room should have turned. It didn't. Marcus counterattacked. He leaned forward, voice steady, and claimed I was lying, that he'd originated the concepts independently, that my timestamps could have been fabricated. And he was good. 15 years of managing operations meant half the board owed him favors. He'd answered their calls at midnight, handled their contracts, smoothed their problems while I was winning design awards. His hybrid adaptation had diluted the fingerprint enough that the design evidence alone wasn't conclusive. For a long, terrible moment, the room was split. I could feel it tilting toward him. Some of them believed him. My case was wobbling, and Marcus knew it. I could see it in his jaw, that familiar tightening, the micro-expression I'd finally learned to read. Not fear, confidence. I have one more thing. I pulled out Luna's drive. The small black drive she'd handed me with shaking fingers 2 weeks ago. Months of compiled server access logs showing every time Marcus had used his COO credentials to access my private design folders. Every timestamp, every file transfer. Data that a quiet girl no one noticed had been building in silence, flagging to IT again and again, only to be dismissed because Marcus controlled operations and marked his own access as authorized maintenance. The evidence I'd swiped away like spam in my first life, the message I never opened, the proof I never read. She'd been trying to save me then, too. This time, I listened. Then the conference room door opened. Uncle Henry walked in, unhurried, certain, like a man who'd spent 40 years pouring foundations and understood that some things can't be rushed. He placed a leather briefcase on the table, opened it, and laid out notarized copies of my original designs, registered with a legal timestamp service the same week I'd put that drive in his hands. The 1-2 punch landed. Luna's logs proved who accessed what and when. Henry's documents proved my designs existed first. The evidence was no longer muddy. It was a flood. Marcus tried one last move, claimed Luna had fabricated the server logs, that she was a junior designer working with me to frame him. The room went silent. I looked at him across the table and felt the temperature in my voice drop to something that had no warmth left in it. If Luna wanted to fabricate evidence, She wouldn't need to. She's more talented than both of us combined. You just never noticed. Because you never notice the people who actually do the work. The board turned. Every face in that room shifted like a tide changing direction. From confusion to certainty. From doubt to something that looked a lot like disgust directed at the man in seat 3. Marcus saw it happen. I watched the exact moment recognition crept across his face. The slow, devastating understanding that every friendly conversation we'd had for the past month, every shared coffee, every time I'd smiled and said, "How's the Lakewood coming along, Marcus?" I'd already known everything. I'd been watching him walk into a trap he designed for himself. I addressed him directly, not for the board, for me. I told him he'd been my brother for 15 years. He ate at my table. He built this firm with me, and he thought I wouldn't notice? I told him the difference between us was never talent, Marcus. It was that I trusted him. That's the part he should carry with him. And I felt it, that cold satisfaction pooling in my chest like ice water. I'd built this trap for weeks. Let him steal. Let him submit. Let him stand in front of that board and lie with my work under his name. And now I watched him understand, piece by piece, that I had known every single step. Was it cruel? Maybe. He destroyed my entire life once. My firm, my reputation, my name. He'd made me drive 90 into the rain because there was nothing left to stay for. So yes, maybe it was cruel, but I wasn't going to let him walk away quietly this time. Not when I'd already died for it once. Marcus was escorted from the building by security. Financial fraud charges, the forged embezzlement records from my first life, would follow within the week. I found Diana in the parking garage an hour later. She was trembling, not from guilt, never from guilt. She told me she didn't mean for it to go this far, that Marcus manipulated her, that she still cared about me. I stood there and listened the way you listen to wind hitting a window, present but completely unmoved. I would have given you anything if you'd asked, Diana, but you took instead. That's not something I can forgive. Then she surprised me. Diana wasn't shaking because of me. She was furious at Marcus. He'd promised her a creative director position at his new venture, used her for access to my files, and when the board meeting collapsed, she discovered he was preparing paperwork to blame her for everything. Out of revenge, not remorse, she pulled out her phone and handed me a recording. Marcus, drunk and celebrating the night after the competition submission, bragging about the embezzlement frame-up in vivid, documented detail. She'd been keeping notes on him for weeks, just like she'd casually mentioned at that dinner. Her insurance had become her weapon. She said, "He promised me a future. He used me. So here, use this." I took the phone, saved the file, handed it back without a word. She wanted me to see her as a victim, a woman caught between two powerful men, swept up in something bigger than her. But I saw what was actually there. A woman who chose greed over loyalty and was angry she didn't get paid for it. Diana had everything Luna would have given anything for. My attention, my trust, my time. 3 years of being seen by the person Luna could only watch from 3 desks away, and she traded it for a job title that never existed. A week later, Diana texted asking for a referral. No, one word, no explanation, no second chance. The door closed, and it stayed closed. Late that night, long after the building emptied and the silence settled in like dust, I sat at my desk and opened the full IT system logs. Not Marcus's access this time, Luna's activity history. And what I found undid me. Months of flagged security reports, every single one dismissed by Marcus. Anonymous code fixes across 14 different projects. Presentation cleanups that turned mediocre pitch decks into winning proposals. Schedule adjustments that kept 3 teams on deadline without anyone knowing who'd done it. All Luna, all unsigned. All completed between midnight and 4 in the morning, while the rest of us were home asleep, never once questioning why the work kept getting better. She had been saving me, saving this entire firm for years, and I didn't even know her last name until a month ago. I walked across the empty office to her workstation. She was still there. Of course she was. She was always there. I sat down across from her, 2 desks apart, the city dark and glittering through the windows behind her. The office was silent enough to hear the building breathe. I just sat there, looking at this girl who had been invisible to everyone, including me, for 3 years, and who had spent every one of those years quietly making sure I didn't fall. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at me, those dark circled eyes, exhausted, stripped bare of every defense she usually wore like armor, and she said 4 words that I will carry with me for the rest of this life and whatever comes after it.
You never asked.
The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. She was right. I never asked. Nobody asked. She had been saving me every night for 3 years, and not a single person in that building, not me, not the partners, not the clients who praised the work she did in the dark, ever once asked her name, her opinion, or why she was still sitting at her desk at 2 in the morning with nothing but a cold cup of coffee and dark circles that never went away. I sat with that for a while, let it burn the way it deserved to. Then I apologized for the snap 2 weeks ago, the drop it that sent her into that trained, devastating silence. She looked confused, genuinely confused, as if she'd already filed the moment under normal and moved on.
People say things like that to me all the time.
5 words, each one a scar I couldn't see. Not because she was trying to hurt me, but because she meant it completely. People did say things like that to her all the time. Foster parents who were supposed to protect her, supervisors who were supposed to notice her, people who should have seen what she was worth and never once looked down from whatever they were doing to check. Not anymore, not for me, never again. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she just looked at me, really looked, the way I had finally learned to look at her, and something shifted behind those exhausted eyes. Not trust, not yet, but the first faint crack in a wall she had spent her entire life building, and for now, that was enough. I took Luna outside the office for the first time on a Thursday evening in early April. Uncle Henry's rooftop garden, above his old workshop overlooking the city skyline at golden hour. It wasn't a date. I told myself it wasn't a date. Henry took one look at Luna standing in the doorway with her shoulders pulled in and her eyes scanning the exits, and he understood everything in about 3 seconds. He said simply, "So this is the one." Luna looked confused. She didn't know what he meant. I did. Henry made coffee. Terrible coffee. He was a contractor, not a barista, and his machine sounded like it was dying. Luna drank it without complaint. He watched her do it, and something softened behind those steel gray eyes of his. Then he leaned close to me while Luna studied the skyline and said quietly, "The best buildings are the ones you don't notice at first. They just feel like home." I looked at Luna, and I understood exactly what he meant. Something loosened in her that evening. Barely, but enough. She pointed at a building across the river and started talking about its structural work, about how the architect had solved a load-bearing problem using offset columns. Her eyes came alive the way they did when she forgot to be afraid. I asked about her approach to natural light. She talked for 10 minutes without stopping, about how morning light enters differently than afternoon light, about windows as emotional instruments, about the philosophy of space as feeling. For 10 minutes, she wasn't a ghost. She was the most brilliant person I'd ever met. Then I reached for her hand, and she flinched. Not a big thing, a small, sharp retraction, like touching a candle flame. Instinct, reflex from a childhood where nobody touched her gently. I pulled back, didn't push, didn't mention it. We kept talking about buildings as if nothing had happened. 1 week later, at her desk, late at night, in the middle of a sentence about cantilever supports, she reached for mine. Small, deliberate. Her fingers barely brushed my knuckles. She didn't look at me when she did it. That touch was the loudest thing she'd ever said. One evening, one of those quiet nights where the takeout containers were empty and the conversation had drifted into comfortable silence, I brought up the cracked coffee cup, the one that had shattered in her hand when Diana touched my arm. "So, were you trying to crush the cup or Diana?" Luna went red, from her neck to her ears, a color I'd never seen on her before. She stared at the cactus on my desk, her cactus, the one she'd swapped for Diana's flowers and never acknowledged, and said nothing for 5 full seconds.
The cup was already cracked.
It wasn't, and we both knew it. She almost smiled. Not quite, but the corner of her mouth twitched, and that was the closest thing to laughter I'd ever seen from Luna Voss. For the first time in this entire story, the audience should smile too. Luna invited me to her apartment for the first time on a Saturday, a significant step for someone who had never let another person into her space. She ordered our usual takeout and stepped out to pick it up from the place downstairs. While she was gone, I looked around. Sparse, almost empty. A bed, a desk, nothing on the walls. A life designed to leave no evidence of itself. Then I noticed a closed door, and I opened it. Her design studio, blueprints, renderings, models, all of them inspired by my architectural philosophy, my signature use of light, my preference for open flowing spaces, my structural choices echoed and reimagined in her hand. And at the center of it all, pinned to every wall, spread across every surface, a complete house design. Every room. The kitchen had the open layout I'd mentioned preferring once at a company lunch. The study faced east. I'd said I liked morning light. The bedroom had a window angled for stargazing, a throwaway comment from a holiday party 3 years ago that I didn't even remember making. She had designed a home for me. Every detail a declaration she couldn't make with words. She'd never shown anyone. She never planned to. I was still standing there when she came home. She walked in carrying takeout, saw me in the studio doorway, and everything in her face collapsed.
I'm sorry. I know it's strange. I know it's too much. I'll throw them away.
Luna, stop.
I just wanted to be useful to you. That's all I know how to do. I can't say the things Diana said. I can't do grand gestures or big words, or I can only make your coffee and fix your files and design things you'll never see. That's all I'm good for. I'm sorry I'm not more.
You think loving someone makes you less? Luna, you are the only real thing in my entire life. Everyone else performed. You just showed up every single day without anyone asking you to.
Because you asked me once, a long time ago. You probably don't remember.
What did I ask you? She shook her head, wouldn't say more. But the words hung in the air between us, like a door left open to a room I wasn't allowed to enter yet. The audience leans forward here. They know this connects to something. They don't know what. They'll have to wait. Henry told me once, through the narrator's voice, in his gruff, no-nonsense way, "She's not a building, son. You can't fix her with blueprints. You just have to be the foundation she can stand on." So that's what I tried to be. Over quiet evenings, she shared fragments of her past. Foster homes, 6 before she aged out at 18. A foster father who repeated, "You're only worth what you can do for people." The belief, cemented in bone, that love and usefulness are the same thing, that if she stopped being useful, she'd be sent away again. I couldn't fix 15 years of being told she was disposable, but I could do the one thing no one had ever done. I could stay. I brought food. I waited. I texted goodnight and meant it. And slowly, unevenly, like a building settling into its foundation, she started to believe it might be real. Then I pieced together the timeline. Luna's server logs had timestamps. The earliest entries were from March. The competition wasn't until May. She'd had enough evidence to come to me directly, months before Marcus ever submitted. Something didn't add up, and I needed to ask, even though I was afraid of the answer. "Luna, you had these logs in March. The competition was in May. Why didn't you come to me then?" She went pale. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight, vibrating with everything she didn't want to say.
Because if I fixed it, if you handled it and everything went back to normal, you would have gone back to not seeing me. I'd be nobody again. I was more afraid of that than of Marcus.
The words hit me like a building coming down. She had let me walk toward disaster, because the disaster was the only thing that might make me finally look at her. The same love that saved me was the love that almost destroyed me, and she knew it.
I know it's selfish. I know you almost lost everything because I was too scared. I'm sorry.
I sat with it. I didn't explode. I didn't comfort her. I let the weight of it settle the way you let concrete cure, slowly, honestly, with no shortcuts. Then I spoke. "You were afraid I'd leave, so you held on too tight. I've done worse for dumber reasons, Luna. I let a man rob me blind because I was too arrogant to believe my best friend could betray me. You hesitated because you were terrified of being alone again. Which one of us is really worse?" He reached for her hand. She flinched, not from the touch this time, but from the fact that he was reaching at all. She had expected him to stand up and walk out the door. She had expected to be sent away, the way she always was when she told the truth. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter. It does. But I'd rather have someone who loved me too much than someone who never loved me at all. She cried. Not the volcano this time. Something quieter. Something that sounded like relief and grief and disbelief all pouring out at once. Because she had never in her life told someone her worst truth and watched them stay. I held her hand. She let me. And outside the window, the city went on building itself. Quietly, invisibly, the way real things always do. Marcus struck back on a Monday morning. He had nothing left. The board had turned, the criminal charges were accelerating, his career was ash. So he did what desperate men do when they can't hurt the person who beat them. He went after the person that person loved. He dug into Luna's background and found exactly what he was looking for. A girl with no formal architecture degree, no credentials, a foster care history that read like a catalog of institutional failure. He sent everything to the Lakewood competition judges, copied architecture trade publications accusations posted on professional industry forums. His claim? Luna Voss was a fraud, a corporate spy planted at the firm to fabricate evidence. Her server logs were forged. Her credentials were fiction. Her only value, he wrote, was proximity to someone who mattered. He attached her foster records as proof she wasn't who she claimed to be. Public records, legal to access, gutless to weaponize. The accusation hit the office like shrapnel. Everyone read it. Everyone saw the foster records. Everyone looked at Luna and saw, for the first time, a version of her she'd spent her entire life trying to bury. She stopped eating, stopped talking. The dark circles came back darker than I'd ever seen them. She moved through the office like she was trying to disappear into the walls. Ghost mode, the survival setting from a childhood where visibility meant pain. I watched it happening, and I felt something in my chest turn to concrete. I started building the counterattack immediately, called Henry, pulled the evidence together, coordinated with our attorneys. I had everything I needed to destroy Marcus's claims permanently. I was 48 hours from finishing it. Luna finished it in 48 seconds. Someone forwarded Marcus's public accusations to the office email list on a Wednesday afternoon. Luna read them at her desk. I know the exact line that broke through, because she told me later, much later, in the dark. Marcus had written, her only value was proximity to someone who mattered. The same frequency as her foster father's voice. The same words repackaged by a different man who saw her as nothing. And something in Luna Voss shifted. Not the volcano, not the ghost. The surgeon. She opened her desk drawer, pulled out a USB drive, every project she'd ever touched, every timestamp, every file with her metadata embedded in the code. She'd had it ready for longer than anyone knew. She stood up from her chair, walked across the office floor, and pushed open the door to a partners meeting she had not been invited to. The room went silent. 12 faces turned toward a girl most of them couldn't name. She placed the drive on the mahogany table with a click that sounded like a gunshot.
Every file on that drive has a timestamp. Every design has my metadata. Every late night I spent fixing work that other people took credit for is logged on the company server. Check them, all of them.
She looked at the room, at every face that had walked past her desk for 3 years without seeing her.
I don't have a degree. I taught myself everything. If that makes me a fraud, then the 12 projects this firm billed clients for using my renderings are fraud too.
She walked out. The room was silent, the kind of silence that follows something no one in the room will ever forget. I stood in the hallway and watched her walk past me. Her hands were shaking. Her jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath her skin. But she did it. She fought for herself. For the first time in her entire life, she didn't wait for someone else to speak for her. I caught her arm. She turned. She was trembling, not from weakness, from the aftershock of becoming someone new. I didn't say anything. I just held her. She let me. I built on her foundation. With Luna's permission, I published her secret portfolio, the designs she'd hidden for years, the buildings inspired by light and feeling, and everything she'd taught herself in the dark. The architecture community saw it within days. The response was overwhelming. She wasn't a fraud. She was a prodigy who had never been given credit. Firms reached out. Publications featured her work. Design schools invited her to speak. Marcus's claims didn't just collapse. They made him look exactly like what he was. I told Marcus the last thing I would ever say to him. I told him he spent 15 years standing next to me and never understood what made good architecture. It's not the person who draws the loudest line. It's the one who makes the space feel like home. He never built anything. He only ever took. Marcus was escorted out for the last time. Not with a bang, with the quiet inevitability of a building condemned. Diana disappeared from the story the same way she'd entered Adrian's life, performing concern until the audience ran out, then simply gone. No redemption, no pity, just consequences settling like dust. Time passed. Luna was offered a full designer position, not by me, not by my firm. A studio that had seen her portfolio recruited her on their own. She hesitated. I could see it in her face. That foster care reflex whispering that it was a trick, that they'd find out she wasn't enough and send her back. You don't have to take it, but you should know they didn't hire you because of me. They hired you because of the house you designed that I was never supposed to see. She took the job, and I designed something for her. A small personal studio. Nothing grand. Just a room with morning light on the east wall. A drafting table positioned exactly where she liked to work, and windows angled wide enough to see the sky. The first space anyone had ever built for Luna Voss. When she saw it, she cried. Not the volcano, not the ghost, Just a woman being given something she never believed she deserved, because someone who builds homes for everyone else deserves one of her own. She told me this story once, much later, after everything. We were lying in the dark, and she finally trusted the silence between us enough to fill it. When Luna was 15, at the lowest point, aging out of the foster system, barely eating, sleeping in a group home that smelled like bleach and resignation, a charity held a build day. Wealthy families constructing homes for foster youth, photo ops, tax deductions. Most of the rich kids stood around in clean clothes, holding hammers they'd never swung. One didn't. A 16-year-old boy noticed the quiet girl who was actually working, carrying lumber twice her size, hammering nails with hands that bled because no one had given her gloves. He walked over, didn't say his name, didn't ask for hers. He took off his jacket and put it on her shoulders because the wind had picked up and she was shivering. Then he said 5 words, "You're better at this than anyone here." That boy was Adrian Cole. He forgot it by the next week. One small kindness in a life full of small kindnesses that cost him nothing to give. For Luna Voss, those 5 words were the first time any human being had told her she was good at something. Not useful, not obedient, not disposable, good. She decided that day to learn architecture. She taught herself structural engineering from library books and free online lectures. She taught herself rendering from YouTube tutorials at public computers. She applied to his firm the week it opened, not for the job, but for the boy who once put a jacket on a shivering girl and told her she mattered. She still has that jacket, folded carefully in the bottom drawer of her desk, 12 years old, worn soft at the collar. She never told him. Every coffee she made him, every file she fixed at 2 in the morning, every late night, every unsigned correction, every rendering that won contracts she'd never see credited to her name. Every room in that house she designed for a man who didn't know she existed. All of it, every single piece of it, traced back to 5 words from a boy who forgot them by Monday. I asked her why she never said anything. She looked at me with those dark circled eyes, still dark, still tired, but no longer empty, and she smiled. A real smile, the kind I'd spent the entire story trying to earn.
He still doesn't remember, and that's okay, because this time he sees me.